PlexTrack is the platform that guides the healthy collaboration of red and blue teams to get the daily security work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Blue teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits through simple visualizations of risk, scanner, and ticketing integrations. Enhanced analytics allow you to effectively communicate risk in real time. PlexTrack is perfect for remote collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month today. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is flat networks inside the cloud and data center that allow threats to move laterally and compromise vulnerable targets. But microsegmentation using traditional firewalls is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation. Using the identity of machines and software that are communicating, Edgewise offers the strongest protection that adapts automatically to changes. Protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We are looking for guest suggestions for our Enterprise Security Weekly podcast to fill some upcoming slots. We've committed to educating and providing entertainment for InfoSec community. This is our 15th year, and we really want to hear from you, especially for this show. If you're an enterprise security practitioner, you're doing cool stuff, or you know someone that's doing cool stuff that's like they should really talk about it, please submit your suggestions by going to securityweekly.com/guests. We review all of those suggestions on a regular basis, and we'll work hard to get people on the show. Join Qualys for VMDR Live on April 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for a live demonstration of the game-changing vulnerability management detection and response, offering the unified solution that integrates vulnerability management, threat prioritization, and patching in a single step. You can register at securityweekly.com/VMDR 2020. I want to introduce a man who needs no introduction, no stranger to the show, and a very good friend. Mr. Dave Kennedy, the founder and CEO of Trusted Sec, is here with us tonight. Dave, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on today. Total pleasure, and hello, everybody out there.
Yes. You know, it's interesting, Dave. We've been doing the show, like I said, for 15 years, and always trying to incorporate the video component as well as audio. We've used a number of different technologies over the years, and there's been a lot of turmoil and issues with those technologies over the years. And I think in the past maybe 5 years or so, it's really kind of steadied out. So when we are dealing with this global pandemic that we're dealing with now with COVID-19, everyone's like, oh, we'll work remotely and do school remotely, and we'll just use Zoom or Skype or Google Meets. And it's working pretty well. From what I mean, my kids, and I'm sure a lot of our other children, right, are using this technology, and a lot of our coworkers and people that work for enterprises are using this technology, and it works pretty well. And I kind of caution people, like, if this had happened 10 or 15 years ago, we'd be in a world of hurt because it was not as reliable anywhere close to what it is today. And
come on, 15 years ago we had AIM.
Yeah, right. Like maybe Skype.
For you youngins, that's AOL Instant Messenger, and AOL was America Online. All right, so we've got some youngins here. So
like video over the internet was kind of like maybe it works at 480p, sorta. Right? Like people don't understand how spoiled we are today, where we can just hop on a Zoom call, right, and have high definition video and audio and be able to converse with each other on a reliable basis.
I would like to amend my curmudgeonly statement. 10, 15 years ago, we had three-way calling, damn it.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was really more about getting voice calls to work. So I've given Zoom accolades on the show before because I believe they're doing a fantastic job in all of a sudden, I mean, literally all of a sudden, the world starts using Zoom and other technologies similar to that on a higher rate that we would have never anticipated. And I tell you what, they're doing a fantastic job. The engineering behind just making this stuff work is truly amazing. It's truly amazing. It's not something they could have predicted.
The fact that when you look at Zoom and this whole thing just happened literally overnight for us, where we went to self-quarantining and everybody was working from home and companies were shifting their entire workforce to work at home, you know, their percentage of increase was in the thousands of percent. of usage.
Wow.
And the fact that, there were some minor glitches around stability, certain things cutting out, but for the most part, they came out of it pretty unscathed, and it's just grown exponentially since then. They've grown their infrastructure, they've grown the amount of users that are using it. Schools have adopted it. It's really impressive that we were able to move from completely on premise for most organizations, or a portion of them, remote work from home, to being able to do a full remote workforce pretty much overnight. We had to do the same thing over at Binary Defense. Binary Defense had our security operations center on premise. We had to switch completely to remote work from home, and literally went without hiccups. It's a testament to technology, how far we've really come, but it's also a testament to how they build their solutions and how we're building technology today to really be able to scale the way that we need to in today's workforce. And it's pretty incredible what they're able to accomplish.
And it's just one reason why when I've read through as many of these vulnerability reports as I could. And I want to just say that there is a certain percentage of these that are those of us that have a spouse of any kind will know that if we get into an argument, which is inevitable if you have a spouse, that they will bring up stuff from the past, right? You get into an argument with your spouse and they start bringing up shit from like years ago, right? And you're like, we've already been through this. I feel like the same thing is happening with Zoom.
I thought we got through this like 4 years ago, right?
Then they're bringing up like the web server vulnerability in Zoom and all these previous vulnerabilities. I'm like, we've already talked about these. They've been addressed. And in fact, Zoom and I'll even go to bat for Skype and Microsoft, as well as Cisco with Webex. When their vulnerabilities are found, they're fixing them. But yet, now that we're in this time that we're in, when there's pressure on all of these technologies, they are bringing up stuff from the past and going, oh, well, this software has vulnerabilities. Well, like newsflash, all software has vulnerabilities, and they've the previous ones, they've all addressed. And I think across the board in a very responsible manner from all the major providers, Zoom included.
Hey, sidebar real quick. I'm sorry, Dave. Totally unrelated to your discussion, but just to all the other spouses out there that are hosts on this show, not only does your spouse bring up past things, but does she remember details, excruciating details, like what you were wearing, what time of day it was, day of the week? My
wife remembers the shoes I wore on our first date, and to this day pokes fun at me for it, just as an example.
So it's not just me. Okay.
I can barely remember what I ate yesterday or today, for that matter.
Right? Yeah. Let alone the shoes you wore on your first date with your wife, right?
When did we meet? What year is that?
It's even better when the two of those mix, that when they bring up something and it's awful, because the first date my wife and I ever went on, I actually left my credit card at the restaurant, and we've been married almost 20 years. And every time we go to eat somewhere, she says, "Did you put your credit card back in your wallet?"
That was 15 years ago or 20 years ago, really.
Right. And they still remember.
Absolutely, that's true love, right?
And it's the same thing with Zoom, and because I see a lot of the reports from the media. And you have to really differentiate, is this a new issue, or is this an old issue that they're talking about that they've already fixed?
Well, let's break this down really quick on the Zoom front, because I'm very passionate about this. You look at Zoom's history, and the two biggest gotchas before in the past were in 2019, where you had a web server that was essentially installed on your it was OS X specific. And when you uninstalled your Zoom, it was still resident on that system, and it had some issues. When Zoom was notified of it, they fixed it within 3 days. There was also another issue where you could join private sessions in certain circumstances, and that was fixed within 2 days. So if you look at prior track record from Zoom, they have addressed issues in a very quick manner that I have never seen before, to be perfectly honest with you.
Better than Microsoft in a lot of solutions. Oh my God.
Right? You're talking months from Microsoft, right? Yeah. I mean, to go through the process, and granted, look at Microsoft's security program, probably one of the most advanced on the earth right now.
Absolutely.
And they still have 0 days and exploits and hundreds of security patches to fix all of their issues. As much security as they integrated, we're going to have these issues. Look at what happened just recently. There was a local privilege exploit and a UNC bypass. There were basically the two major prominent things that we saw out there today, where not UNC bypass, I'm sorry, UNC pass and a local privilege escalation exploit for OS X, and then one for Windows for the UNC pass. And you look at that when you say, okay, well, first of all, you'd have to have local access to the system on OS X in order to compromise in the first place. So Yeah, privilege escalation sucks. Medium risk on that part, not part. And then you also have the UNC issue where you can click a link and then potentially execute stuff. Zoom fixed it within a day, 1 day.
I want to say that Skype had a similar issue years ago. And in our show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com, I pulled all the CVEs for Skype, Webex, and Zoom. They're not that much different. I mean, if you look at them over time, and I haven't done in-depth analysis, our audience is more than welcome to do analysis on those. Like, in terms of severity and numbers, nothing really sticks out to me as there being, like, really anything different between the three.
Yeah. And that's the problem I have with this is that you look at the security industry and the world listens. It's not 10, 15 years ago. And we were talking about this, when the show was over, I made the statement, 10, 15 years ago, Dave would call 10 current 15 years older Dave a bitch because, because we were all about releasing 0 days and we were all about releasing exploit code and showing how awesome we were. And, companies weren't taking us seriously. So we would jam a 0 day down their throats and put it on Millworm or Exploit DB. And what has changed is the world actually listens to us. They're like, hey, if there's a security vulnerability, we actually have to fix that because it's going to impact our product and our integrity for our customers.
Yep.
And when we drop stuff on the internet now, it's very different of an impact than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And so instead of giving Zoom the opportunity to disclose that and to actually address it and fix it, it was just posted on a website. And Patrick Wardell, who's a phenomenal researcher, he's brilliant. Objective-C stuff he does is absolutely incredible. I have a lot of respect for Patrick. I disagree with his way that he actually published it online because it was really a slam article against Zoom in order to generate news and media hype. And I really do believe that was the main intent behind it, to generate a lot of buzz around trying to hammer Zoom because right now that's the hot topic button item from a work from home strategy. I have family members are like, I'm scared to use Zoom because I feel like, someone's going to start sending me porn, in the middle of one of my Zoom meetings with my grandma, and we have caused.
But that's a legitimate concern, but I don't think it's a porn. Yeah,
grandma gets her porn other ways.
But I want to table that issue for a moment, and I do respect Patrick, and he's been on the show before.
Absolutely.
And he's a brilliant researcher.
This is not a slam against Patrick in any way.
Not in any way.
I respect the heck out of Patrick. Absolutely.
I do want to say in specifically the local privilege escalation vulnerability, I want to get the panel's opinion on, like, where does the responsibility fall? When I read the description from Patrick, who again did a great job of analyzing it and providing us with all the details, how much of the responsibility falls on Apple to protect the operating system versus the application and the engineers at Zoom that implemented it that way? And I think there's some reasons why we saw the web server vulnerability and this particular local privilege escalation, right? They're in a very competitive space. They're trying to steal market share from Cisco and Microsoft, two of the largest software companies in the world, and they want to make it easy for people to be able to install this software, and reducing the number of clicks is a thing. So I mean, I fall both sides, right? Like, I see what Zoom is doing, but the thing is, when Zoom is called out for these, they fix it very quickly, as we've already pointed out. So what's the assessment? How much responsibility falls on Apple, and how much responsibility falls on Zoom in terms of some of these more recent, like the local privilege escalation vulnerability?
I think, and I'll pass it over to anybody here. It's a combination of both. The way that this was installed was a well-known, deprecated way to do an installation that kind of circumvents.
It was that API call, right?
Yes, that API call was deprecated. It's not supported, but it's still allowed within Apple. And malware users use it, or malware applications use it, as well as a number of other installation paths. Zoom isn't the only one using this technique in order to do installations with less clicks.
What's interesting, Dave, did you notice that in Patrick's blog post that the example he had from his DEF CON or Black Hat or both presentation was VMware? Yeah. When I installed an update for VMware on my Linux workstation, it prompted me for my password to use sudo to install it, right? And I knew what it was doing. I'm like, I have to install an update for VMware, right? Actually, one of my VMs was hosed, and the installation process was totally borked. So I rebooted, and the VM actually shut down. I went through the process. It prompted me and said, hey, I need root to install this software. And I'm like, well, everything in my opinion checks out. So I'm going to give you my password so that you can become root and update my VMware process, right? So why isn't VMware under the same scrutiny that Zoom is under when in any other software provider that's like, hey, in order to apply an update or install my software, I need escalated privileges, right? That's a thing. When we
because
software.
Zoom is making news right now. That's why, and that's the problem I have with this whole situation that we put ourselves in, is that you look at these news media articles, and one thing I want to make a shout out to is Lily from Wired. Mm-hmm. She did a news article on Zoom, and she got a number of perspectives from a number of security researchers, people in the industry, and she started off with, "This really isn't that bad." And this is before I said any of my stuff.
Wait, I wonder if that's the same author that wrote John Strand's article about his mom doing pen tests. Is that the same one?
Person.
She is awesome. She's awesome.
Amazing.
Yes.
Lily is by far one of the best reporters when it comes to security news out there, period. Mm-hmm. She does her analysis. She understands what the topics are. Every news article that she has come on is just spot on. And she nailed this one too. And it's funny because I was talking to Lily, and when I published this whole string of Twitter rants about security, taking security seriously, the security industry seriously, Lily was like, "Hey, did I make this article right? I'm kind of second guessing it." And I read through the whole thing, and it was phenomenal. It is exactly what you want. It walked through the issues, but it also showed that, hey, in order for this to actually happen, it would take a cataclysmic set of events to occur on your system in order for something to happen, and really put risk into perspective. So if a normal user is reading through it, they'd be like, "Oh, this really isn't that bad. I understand." So, there are great reporters out there that are really trying to get an understanding, but there's also the major hype of things out there too, that are like, "Hey, we need to make a news article that sounds extreme so we get clickbait, stuff in there."
And unfortunately, they're the majority, right? The Lilies of the world are the minority.
Well, right? But you're finally touching on what I think.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You're finally touching on what I think sort of more of the root cause or what really is going on here. Two things. One, nobody in the world, vendor, organization, company, or otherwise, had any idea that what we're experiencing right now was coming. There's no, in my opinion, there's no reason to beat up on any company vendor that wasn't completely prepared for what we're experiencing.
Great
job. But more directly to what you were just saying, Dave, is that because the world is shut down, we're in this sort of slow news cycle, if you will, and there's a lot of people that are involved in the media industry, and because I avail myself of free media passes when there is conferences because of my affiliation with Security Weekly, I'm on a lot of media mailing lists, and I have simply just once a day I search my email for COVID-19 and then I just delete. I'm not even,
I know,
if it's in the subject line anymore, I'm not even reopening it. But in a lot of people's
campaign
defense,
against Jeff, by the way.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Try something else. But in their defense, I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, either out of work or about to be out of work because they got nothing to write about, and a lot of the media press industry is designed to promote products, so it's tied into sales and marketing, and this whole thing is blown up. So I have a little bit of sympathy, empathy for the people that are trying to scrape things up and make mountains out of molehills because there's nothing else to write about.
Right
now,
and this is related to COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, it's related to COVID-19. But to your point, and I like what you did, Paul, in terms of, well, how are all the other tools holding up? Why are we picking on Zoom? I mean, in the last week, I was involved in a web conference call that was on Webex, and this was in the first days of it was probably 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, in the early days of sort of everybody starting to figure out that we got to isolate, and the call just failed miserably. And I assumed, okay, Webex was not prepared. Cisco was not prepared for the influx. So for any of these platforms that are doing better now, not anticipating the exponential growth in terms of demand that's been experienced, more power to them. So all that said, I think those are the underlying factors, and to some degree, I think we should, we can pick on the people, the press and the reporters that are doing this, and maybe say it's a lot of hype and everything, but at least we know a little bit about where it's coming from, and maybe there's some empathy that's deserved on our part because we're all just trying to scramble and try to figure out how to make that ends meet.
That's the big point right there, right? Like, one of the big things that I think needs to be addressed is our responsibility during this time, and not even just this time, like moving forward. We're in a different time, like Dave said. Yes. As security researchers, as InfoSec professionals, let's be professional about this, and let's do this the right way. This PrivEsk is, it's a PrivEsk. Any given software at any point in time, if you look at that piece of software and you scrutinize, you throw up Procmon and start to dive into API calls or installations, I guarantee almost any piece of software on most of these platforms, we've used them or abused them at some point for privilege escalation. That's nothing new. Anything you look at, you're going to gain some privilege escalation on in one way or another, whether that's DLL hijacking or COM hijacking. There's a million ways to do that. So the fact that they picked on something that was in the news for hype, fully and transparently goes against, as professionals, how we should be doing this. And
Tyler, you know what's interesting? To your point, Tyler, because of the current times, because of COVID-19, one of the things I've done to boost morale in our household is build a gaming PC, right? Now, largely, and I'm sure a lot of people fall in this category, not a lot of Windows machines are being used by your children and your spouses if you're in security, right? You give them iPads, you give them Macs, you give them Chrome OS, where they're not as much of a target as if they're running Windows. Literally, I left my oldest son in my office with the newly built gaming PC for 5 minutes. I came back down, and I see he's already downloaded an executable. Luckily, I caught him before he clicked on it, and I kind of flipped out. And then I was like, all right, calm down, Paul, calm down. I'm like, look, I haven't had to have this conversation with you because you've largely been on an iPhone platform and a Chrome OS platform. I'm like, now you're on a Windows platform. I explained to him what ransomware was. I explained to him how much Windows.
Attack surface is completely different.
The attack surface is completely different. I'm like, dude, you want to browse the web? I'm like, quite frankly, go use your laptop and your phone and your tablet, which I've provided for you and the school's provided for you to do that stuff, not this PC, because it's a different thing. And then doing the forensics on it, I started looking into all the other client software that was installed on it. And when you compare that to things like Zoom, I'm like, there's a lot of other stuff we could be talking about. Have you looked at the connections that Chrome makes or Steam makes into your network? Like, Steam has this whole protocol where it's connecting to other...
Steam is literally malware for the network.
It is. That was my assessment too, Dave, right? I was like, oh my God, this is horrible.
How else are you going to play
Then I looked at Chrome, and
I'm like... I got Steam on my network. I'm not complaining.
No, I do too, because we all, we got a game, and it's, but also Chrome is making connections to all my other Chromecast devices and Android TV devices. I'm like, well, first of all, that's one reason why Chrome takes up so much goddamn resources on my system. I'm like, secondly, are these connections normal or not? And I'm like, if every client application came under the scrutiny that Zoom did, we'd all be making very similar kind of assessments of that software.
So I want to hit 2 points on that. So Tyler nailed it on the sense that we have a responsibility. It's like looking at what was happening during the COVID-19 issues prior to us going to self-quarantining. You had the doctor community basically saying, the medical industry basically saying this is really bad. They were unified in saying that once the information came out that this is going to be really bad, projections, millions of deaths, all this other stuff, right? Very similar in the security space where, you have to have a unified voice into things that are dangerous for the population. I would say that I probably have, and this is not an ego thing in any way, shape, or form, but I probably have some of the most amount of media experience than probably anybody in the security industry on being on the news, testifying in front of Congress, and one of the things that I learned very early on, and healthcare.gov was a great example of it, where it was so politicized that my message of trying to help make the federal government better at security was completely lost in the fact that they were just targeting healthcare.gov.
Yeah.
Right. The Republicans were going after healthcare.gov. The Democrats were being, defensive. I remember going on Sean Hannity, and you all can say, hey, well, I can't believe you went on Sean Hannity. I go on every news organization, whether it's MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, Fox News. I don't care who it is. I like to get the message out. And I remember going on
getting your 15
media
minutes of fame 10 seconds at a time.
I think Dave has 15 hours of fame right now, collectively.
I'm honestly really, really nervous every time I go on the news, not because of who I'm talking to, but because I want to represent the information security industry the right way. And when I went on Sean Hannity, the first thing he said to me was, David, I think it was during the Hillary server email issues or whatever that was happening out there, and very politicized issue. But I was there just to talk about classified systems. I came from the intelligence community, have experience in that area. And he said, hey, David, this whole Hillary thing is a total failure on President Obama's part for not securing the systems and and all this other stuff. And I said, listen, Sean, I appreciate your perspective. However, I'm here to talk about security and what this means, what the servers were, where they're located at, the exposures that could potentially happen there. I'm not here to talk about the political aspects. And, when you get to the media side, they are very much trying to make a distinct point, whether it's Fox or CNN or whomever.
Yeah.
And you really have to be careful on how you project that information, because people really get sensationalized by all of this, and it blows up into epic proportions. And I have failed many times on doing this, where I'm trying to just communicate an issue, and it just explodes into this cataclysmic doom and gloom apocalyptic thing that's happening. And that's not necessarily the case. So my point to what Tyler was hitting on was that, we have a very big responsibility to communicate things in a way to the media that has to dumb it down in a way that everybody can understand. Patrick Wardell, had a very great technical blog of the analysis. The media took that and said, there's all of these issues with Zoom. You should stop using it. And that's a problem, right? We have to be a concise message around everybody saying, hey, Zoom is safe to use. Here's the things that we recommend that you do to enhance it, to make it better.
You're pointing out something that's really significant, though, Dave, and I don't know that there's a good solution for it, but while I agree with you that we need to be very careful what we say and how we represent, what we can't necessarily control is what is heard.
No,
I agree.
It's true. And, just the next thing I want to talk about with Zoom is our good friend Trent Lowe, and I think all of us are good friends with Trent.
I love Trent.
Yeah, right. I think literally all of us are good friends with Trent. And I believe,
hey, Dave, I've got something for you. It's this bottle of ice. Wait, no.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of icing going on.
We should do remote icing. We should honestly have
remote icing. I like that.
Next to us.
That's
and you can ice the other person.
But Trent and they consulted with a lot of security professionals about this topic. I was very honored to have myself included. And I said, look, guys, I'm like, it's not really the time. I'm like, if this tool falls into the wrong hands and it gives people the capability to essentially do war dialing for Zoom calls. And I'm like, where my thoughts immediately go to is I've watched my son, who's in preschool, do Zoom calls with his classroom, right? And I'm sure many Americans and many people across the globe have witnessed similar things, right? And the joy that you see where your preschool age children can have interactions with their classroom and their teacher, and like how awesome that is, right? Because they miss each other, they miss that interaction. And at that age, it's less about like learning stuff like math and more about social interaction. So for them to have that was really important. The fact that people who are basically assholes could pollute that and discover these open Zoom rooms and put porn and other ridiculous things in there was really kind of just awful to me. So, when I saw this research, I'm like, this is important, and I'm torn as well, right? Because I told them, I'm like, look, we've done segments on the show with Dan Farmer, I think gone back as far as history as we can go, about releasing a tool that, yes, people could use it for bad, but the good people could also use it to improve their systems and raise awareness, right? I'm like, I get that. Like, we've been there with Metasploit, we've been there with Mimikatz, we've been there with all the way back to Satan. I'm like, but
Paul,
in the
15 year ago, Paul is calling you a bitch right now.
Yes, exactly. It's totally true, Larry. It's totally true. It's totally true.
Dave is calling you a bitch right now.
Like 15-year-old Paul would be like, release that shit and like let it fly, right?
Oh, yeah, now let the world burn. They need to recognize how awesome this shit is right here, right?
Now I'm like, hack the planet. They're trashing our rights. But
hey, look, I have such warm feelings that you youngsters are growing up and showing signs of maturity right now.
But like more mature Paul's like, we probably shouldn't put this tool in the hands of people that could use it for harm right now. I'm like, give it some time. And so what they ultimately decided was the decision was to announce it, that this is possible, but not release the tool. I thought that was the most responsible thing you could do as a security researcher, because it accomplishes the goal of raising awareness, 100%. But not giving the tool to just any jackass that can cause harm to our children, right? Which is very important to all of us, right?
I think also to discuss the article I saw was with Trent discussing some of the methods about why some of their tools are different. Gives people the ability to recreate it that have enough smarts to make it happen,
and that was part of
professional enough to make it happen.
And that was part of my advice was, the other thing you can do, and what I still see today with exploits, like some of the first exploits I worked with 15 plus years ago were purposely had bugs in them, right?
Yeah,
like they may have had bugs and also bugs that were purposely introduced. I'm like, you can do the same thing. So the people that know what they're doing can go use the tool, but they got to have some really good smarts, right? And I think that's a valid strategy. So, seeing what they did may spawn research, but it raises the bar so that it's not just like everyone can have this tool right now. Release it eventually, right? But I think that releasing a tool for one specific vendor is also kind of dangerous as well, if it's not a large provider like Microsoft that can push out those fixes to make the large majority of their customers more resilient.
So I have an internal dilemma then that I'd like to share with you guys, and I really would love feedback, because it's honestly one of those things where I'm torn half and half in between. With Magic Unicorn, which is a tool that I wrote 6 years ago, which does PowerShell exploitation, and one of the big things is it bypasses EMSI and allows remote code execution onto the system. 6 years ago, that was a great tool, right? Mm-hmm. But today, you look at it, and what Microsoft is doing is they're essentially writing signatures for my tool. And so what will happen is it literally requires minuscule, and I'm talking like adding a plus sign or a parenthesis to break their signature detection. And so I've been having this battle with Microsoft every 2 weeks where I just rewrite, Unicorn, and I publish a new version that gets around the anti-malware scan interface and AMSI. And I publish that out there because I'm trying to force Microsoft's hand to get better with how they're doing their detections, and to get them to move better. But it hasn't worked for 6 years. So should I continue to release new versions of Unicorn that circumvent AMSI, which could be used for bad actors? Or do I just leave it? And with the description of it, it's basically saying, hey, if you're an actual hacker, it's very trivial for you to get around this, and promote more education around how bad that is versus actually releasing the tool. It's something that I struggle with all the time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dilemma, right? I think at some point you got to push the envelope that you hope doesn't have significant impact to help the bad people, right? But also by releasing it also helps the good people, right? And that's a balancing act as security researchers that we'll always have to struggle with.
I think one of the big pieces there that you're hitting on is something that is paramount to how we do offensive security. We really have to be careful about making sure we're not training our clients to detect us as offensive professionals, and to be able to detect the technique or the root cause of why things are insecure. And that means, hey, Microsoft, fix the root problem, adjust the AMSI engine, and let's make this an effective security mechanism. Otherwise, we're just going to keep doing this. And so, like, just like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you have all these individual signatures, but then you have the actual TTPs and the tactics, and you got the pieces at a high level that, hey, if you stop privilege escalation by doing X, Y, and Z, testing your gold image, doing all these things, and you're addressing it not from a technique that's individualized to a higher level root cause problem, that's when you start to make big security changes. Otherwise, it's a cat and mouse game, and I guarantee we're going to always get ahead.
Okay. You brought up MITRE ATT&CK framework, and Dave's on the line. Dave, I have a question for you. Whenever I hear MITRE ATT&CK framework, I think Heartbreak Ridge. And I know you're an ex-Marine, and I'm wondering if you have the same experience where every time I hear MITRE ATT&CK framework, I'm hearing, well, sir, our job is to go over this next hill around this next turn and die in a large, grotesque Marine Corps manner because we're going to be the victims of an ambush.
So for me, I like MITRE's conceptual framework, right? Because it takes a step further from, the Lockheed Martin and drink cyber kill chain buzzword. So everybody drink right now. Everybody's got a drink. Sorry.
Yeah, we got a drink. I'll refill to drink for that one.
But the piece around what MITRE has done is they've taken it's a shift in us in security to say we're not going to be 100% perfect in any way, shape, or form around vulnerability management, around our mitigations or our protection strategies, and that we're going to fail. And so what happens when we fail? So during initial access, all the way to privilege escalation, lateral movement, post-exploitation scenarios, et cetera, that we're all familiar with, how do we get better defenses with knowing the techniques that adversaries use? Now, that is great in conception, but what has happened is that MITRE ATT&CK has become a glorified tool that people will run scripts through, and they write detections off of the techniques, and they think that they're covered from an attacker's perspective. And that's not how MITRE should be leveraged.
Exactly. Yeah. The bottom line is, okay, it's like teaching to the test, Common Core and everything, if you wanted to use an education analogy. But my fear is, okay, we've passed the MITRE framework, and we've forgotten to learn that what the real lesson of security is. And Tyler, I love you, but I don't believe there's such a thing as offensive security, and we can talk about that later. But what we haven't taught with the MITRE ATT&CK framework or whatever is you're not looking for specifics. You're looking for methodologies. You're looking for anomalies. You're looking for things that are weird and different. And at the essence, that's what security is all about: is trying to discover that thing that's not normal, that's an indicator that there's something bad going on.
Now, Jeff, along those lines, I want to frame this in the context of my personal experience lately. Okay. And I want to put this in the context.
So you're bringing up Docker now?
No, I want to put this in the context of Zoom afterwards, right? Like what you do to secure Zoom. But in my scenario, right, having in all my experience, I introduce a Windows machine to my family, right? My kids are roughly 4, 7, and almost 12. And I brought this new Windows machine in, and it's brand new to them. When I got thinking about how do I protect it from a population in my house that largely is not used to securing a Windows system, how would I protect that? And I was like, if I could answer this question, this might be really valuable information. So I want to put it out there to folks that break into Windows systems for a living, that consult with people for a living on how they should protect their systems. If you were put in this scenario, how do you protect a Windows 10 system, modern system today? What would you do?
I would take that one step further, Paul, and I would challenge, this is actually a side project I've been working on since this started. I would challenge the community to collaborate on the things that are important, the things that matter, the things that don't break everything, and build a PowerShell script or a set of GPOs and PowerShell scripts that get deployed that someone can easily click on, that doesn't have a whole bunch of security risk, that then allows a parent to say, hey, here's at least a better baseline for my kids to get on the internet, do their work, or a grandma or my aunt working from home. We have a million people we're trying to support. As a community, we need something that's easy to deploy, that everybody is kind of collaborating to, because we all don't know all the answers. We can come up with 500 recommendations, but doing that for everyday systems for most normal people. We need a good baseline.
I agree.
But I want to hit on a point that Jeff hit on really quick, because I think it's important for the listeners to understand this. Jeff, what you're talking about is that, you mentioned look at the abnormal behavior of things that are exhibiting, right? And and who nailed it a couple of years ago was Jeff Moss. Jeff Moss gave a intro keynote before he actually introduced the keynote over at Black Hat. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? And he said, as an industry, and he was so spot on that I literally, this is one of the things that gets me so excited I can take my shirt off. And Paul, you've been there, you've seen me with my shirt off.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Absolutely.
But what he said is that as an industry, we talk about and to Tyler's point, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of attackers, right? We say, we focus on the TTPs of attackers, but as an industry, we're solely focusing on the techniques. We're not looking at the tactics, that the behavior that the attackers exhibit, or the procedures that they operate by. We're solely looking at historical data around a specific attack and building detections off of that. And I think there's a balance between the two. MITRE, from a techniques perspective, is great because you can say, okay, well, based on my threat models, here's the APT actors that I want to map to, and here's their techniques that I can baseline my environment to, and here's the type of area they live in. They live in WMI, they live in PowerShell exploitation, or they live in these specific areas for remote code execution. And we build our emphasis on those. But if you're just building off of techniques, you're not building off of behavior, you're sorely losing the battle around actually detecting specific threats that are happening out there. And we have to evolve beyond that. And that's why my dilemma with Microsoft is you have to evolve beyond putting a parentheses around a parameter for your detection. That is not a good preventative mechanism. I want to throw one specific use case out there, RegSVR32, which has been abused to living hell from all malware authors out there. RegSVR32/I, give it an HTTP parameter. You can download scripted objects and execute them with the strobj.dll, right? In that specific case, Microsoft is like, oh, hey, we're going to block with Windows Defender the ability for you to go out and use /I HTTP. Why not lock down and release a new version? You own the operating system that doesn't allow you to go and download specific files directly from the internet and execute scripted objects. But instead, they patch it with a Windows Defender signature, which is extremely easy to bypass and to get around by a few tiny modifications. And you have the ability for remote code execution. So they're looking at the technique, not the behavior that it exhibits. And I understand it's a very difficult process with the landscape of Microsoft, but we have to move more towards understanding the behavior that attackers exhibit, not the actual technique itself.
What I'm hearing you say, Dave, hold on, Tyler. What I'm hearing you say, I'm sorry, Tyler, I'm older. I love Jeff. What I'm hearing you say, Dave, and correct me if I'm wrong, the parallel that I'm seeing is it sounds like you're making the same distinction, or Jeff Moss made the same distinction that our industry is. How is it different? What you're describing sounds a lot like signature-based detection, which is what we're bitching about. Well, endpoint protection is just pointless.
That's what it is today. Windows Defender is still signature-based detection.
Right. Yeah. But what you're also describing, that's a lot of what we do as an industry in terms of defenders, in terms of, red teamers, pen testers. I assume that's who we're talking about. The whole thing is signature based, isn't it?
Yep. CrowdStrike is signature based. SentinelOne is signature based. You name it, it's still signature based. Regardless if they put machine learning on it or artificial intelligence or whatever it ends up being, they're literally looking for attack patterns and writing signatures off of that. If you change your deviation of patterns of behavior, you circumvent those detections.
But what about whitelisting?
Let me refill my glass. Tyler had something to say.
But what about whitelisting? What if in my scenario I want to allow my children to
100%.
I want to run these applications, and these are the only applications I want them to run. Are there low cost and or free solutions out there for people to be able to accomplish that?
Absolutely. Sean Metcalf's taken great lengths to put out very, very good detailed information on how to lock down a Windows system and have visibility. In fact, Microsoft in general has made a very nice, secure platform when deployed right, but easily deploying it for the average person becomes very difficult. That was kind of Windows S, or Windows 10 S was kind of a stepping stone for that. But like,
look at when, and I interrupt you, Tyler. I'll give it right back to you. But look at Windows S. Matthew Graeber, who I consider probably one of the most top security researchers out there from a Windows perspective. The guy is absolutely brilliant. He tried Windows S. I mean, literally the smartest Microsoft application whitelisting person in the world. He tried Windows S. He gave it like a month and he couldn't use it. Right? He's
Wait, what is Windows S? What is Windows S?
It was supposed to be the most secure Windows operating system platform, period. You couldn't join domains, and it was basically like a completely gutted out lockdown version of Windows 10. And it was so locked down that you couldn't do anything on it. Matt had to be like, I can't do this anymore. I can't even use my operating system. I have to move on. And he spent probably months documenting how he was using it, configuration profiles, device guard configurations for application control bypass techniques for living off the land binaries and scripts, and he's like, this is not even usable. I have to get rid of it.
Is there a way for even like middle advanced users to containerize applications? Like I know Windows has this capability to containerize an application. Like I want them to be able to run this application. I want to run it inside of Windows, inside of a container. Like that stuff is still hard. In other words,
so there's a bunch of tools that have been out for a really long time, and I'm still not sure why some of these tools have not taken off or gotten some of the publicity that may or may not be deserved. But even going back to 2008, I was using a tool called Sandboxy. Sandboxy's still around. They're still an enterprise level, and they have a free version for home users. But it essentially sandboxes any file application. It basically on the fly builds needed registry keys and access to those, but it keeps everything sandboxed in. You can have multiple boxes, and it's super easy to deploy. And this is something that I've put on my grandma's machine. I've put this on machines that, I don't trust or has been reinfected at many enterprise level places. Now, these applications exist. These programs exist. You could do it with Microsoft for that matter. Again, it comes back to the ease and usability and knowledge of the general public or the people deploying these. This isn't in the media. This isn't a well-known application, yet it's super easy to use and does what it's supposed to do. And again, that would be a solution. But kind of going back to what we were saying around like these TTPs, like MITRE's initial, their intent was good, but we've gotten to the place where people want a easy checkbox. So the easy checkbox for MITRE was, hey, we can detect this T1 through 500. Great, we're secure. And again, we've lost the sight of, and vendors included, they've lost the sight of protecting the core foundation of what we're trying to do. Is it initial access? How do we protect initial access? How do we protect the credentials? What little pieces can we do to stop a phishing campaign or get execution? Like these are the things that vendors, they're not doing any better job. We as consumers aren't helping that. And really at the end of the day, there's not a lot that we can do unless you're highly technical, because there's no easy button. Microsoft has the capabilities and it's free, but no one's taken the time to address that from a very easy standpoint.
My only disagreement with what you're saying, Tyler, is I don't think we've devolved to this. I think it's always been this way.
Very true.
We as consumers have always looked for the easy way out. Just tell us what to do, what button to push, what do I need to buy.
Yeah, like what antivirus software do I need to install to make sure I'm not going to get ransomware by my children, right?
Yep.
And when I was faced with that question, I'm like, I can't answer that.
But I'll take
I'm like, we're all screwed. I'm like, basically my solution was you go in, you play your game. If I see you outside of your game because I have a camera in the office where the computer is, I'm going to come and stop you and unplug the computer. And that's the best I can do for security.
Platforms like Chromebook, for example, have made it so easy for us to be able to lock down our children, right? My son's got a Windows machine, and I struggle to lock that down. I mean, granted, he doesn't have admin rights.
That makes me feel better, Dave. Yeah, because I'm in the same struggle right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chromebooks and iOS has made it really easy for us to be able to limit the operating system of what they can do. Now, granted, it's limited in what it can do, right? Because that's the design and aspect.
But you still have the kind of like Zoom-ish problems of I can manipulate the application, right? Sure. So my sons are on TikTok and or Instagram, and they're getting phishing direct messages and adult inappropriate direct messages, right? And it's monitoring software that can monitor that stuff and education like sitting down with my son going like, what message have you gotten recently and how do you respond to those kind of thing. I think it makes it easier, right? I think it takes out a lot of these other attacks and allows us to focus as guardians and parents to be like, yeah, that's bad. Like, here's why people will lie to you on the internet. Here's why you shouldn't trust people that send you messages, right? And have monitoring software to go, yeah, that's not cool, right?
I would like to take that one step back, though, and outside of Chromebook, which are great, really make sure that we're not promoting and not getting confused with the attack platform and the attack surface of other devices. Like Mac or OS X is not any more secure than Windows. And at the end of the day, honestly, from a visibility standpoint and from a novel or malware standpoint, the reason that they're not targeted as much is just because of market share, and that does not mean that they're not targeted, and especially right now.
But that's a great point for Zoom, right? The reason why the media and everyone is talking about Zoom security is because all of a sudden it was under this spotlight, right? And Microsoft has gone through this, right? And many other companies Oracle's gone through. Many other companies go through this. All of a sudden, you're under the spotlight. And by the way, security researchers are going to point out any kind of vulnerability that we can. And I think that's somewhat unfair to the vendor being picked on, right? Because other software applications have even more heinous vulnerabilities that aren't getting the media attention. But right now, Zoom is, because they're the one that we're all looking at. And quite frankly, I think Zoom is doing a great job in providing the necessary protections and response to the security vulnerabilities.
So really quick, Andrew McPherson, as I was on this podcast, just sent me a brand new article that just came out from The Guardian. And guess what the freaking headline is? That's what the freaking headline is.
Do tell.
I'm getting to it right now. Sorry. There's a whole bunch of problems. I can't figure out how to get. So the headline of The Guardian. The headline of The Guardian is Zoom is malware. Why experts worry about the video conferencing platform. That's the freaking headline that we're talking about and that we're sharing out to the masses. And it goes into detail about how it goes into the same stuff that we're talking about before. It's total garbage. Like, we're literally feeding, the security industry is literally feeding a bunch of garbage to these news media outlets for clickjacking, click purposing. It drives me nuts. Like, it's absolutely garbage.
Well, you know what's going to happen is social engineering, right? As the media portrays, unrightfully so, Zoom is malware, people are going to uninstall it and go, well, what's the next thing? And the attacker that figures out that I can present the user with software that will accomplish the same things as Zoom and actually be malware will actually win, right? And there's a story that I put in my articles that is there's attackers doing this. There's attackers doing this, pretending to be Zoom, but it's not really Zoom.
Malicious downloaders, absolutely.
So I want to shift gears slightly and ask our panel a question. I was having a discussion with some of my colleagues today. We were talking about some of the challenges facing the healthcare industry, and especially given that the OCR, the Office for Civil Rights, as I was taught is the appropriate way to say it, has put out a notice saying that certain HIPAA regulations are going to be relaxed. My wife has already experienced this. She needed to call the doctor and have an appointment, and the doctor's office set up basically a virtual examination. I don't think they actually used Zoom, but they used some sort of video conferencing software.
Telex? Is that
But my question, the question that we were noodling over there, and I'm curious to get your guys' opinions, is, you're using some sort of video conferencing technique. You're in an environment that has regulatory controls, privacy, both from a security and a privacy perspective. Getting beyond all the vulnerabilities and O-days that have been discovered on Zoom, or just in general, the video conferencing services. What is your opinion on whether, in the specific context of a sort of a remote virtual exam, how do you deal with that type of data? Should that video be recorded and retained? And that's probably the primary question. And if you're retaining it for whatever reason, presumably you need to secure it in terms of storage. Obviously, with all the Zoom stuff going out there, is whether it was confidential and protected when it's actually happening. But I want to shift away from that and just get your thoughts on whether it should be retained. Are there reasons why it should be retained, and what would be the appropriate manner to store the recording?
I'll take a stab at something.
Yeah,
sure.
Tyler, I'd love to comment real quick here.
You have at it, Larry.
Mostly because not necessarily on the recording thing, but some of the stuff that I'm hearing about the relax of the HIPAA rules and all this type of stuff kind of drives me nuts. Mm-hmm. Prior to doing in consulting, I spent 12 and a half years in healthcare. I was in healthcare when HIPAA became a mandate, and I helped the organization craft their HIPAA policies, their implementations, and you name it. And with all of the HIPAA regulations at the time, the deal was with the planning, you were supposed to be able to maintain the same level of HIPAA security that you were doing on a day-to-day basis in a disaster. So as part of your disaster recovery plan, you had to maintain the same level of user access control, same level of encryption when you moved to your backup. And I get that no one expected this kind of shit show to happen and that people can't do it. I am not surprised because it was my experience that healthcare industry was so far behind the 8 ball in doing any of their implementation just in their day-to-day, let alone in any of the backup.
What's interesting, Larry? When I look at the COVID-19 reports in the media and the facts, which are two totally different things in my opinion, right? And there are people who I trust that are presenting actual facts, right? Like there is a PhD physicist that I used to work with in security that is presenting absolute facts, right? And one of my trusted sources. When I look at that, I'm like, if we as the hacker community had to design a biological virus, it might have looked very much like COVID-19, because COVID-19 not only hacked not just human physiology, but the healthcare systems and the sociology of the way humans interact at such a level. Financial. If we had to design a physical virus, it might look very much like COVID-19, and that kind of scares me. That's the way we think in the terms of the cyber realm, right? If we were tasked with designing a virus to hack the physical realm, it might look like very much like the enemy we're facing today. Yeah. Do you guys agree? Disagree? Like, do you think the same way?
I would have made it a little bit smarter, honestly. Like, it would have mutated a few more
Tyler,
times.
that's the really scary thing. Like, we could have made it even better, right? Like, better, but worse. Like, better in terms of more effective in killing people, but very, very, very scary. Dave, you know what's interesting, Dave, is what I was talking with your wife on Facebook, right? And I was like, like we're more prepared for this just because we've dealt with the stomach flu. Yeah. And when I talk with my pediatricians, right, because we have 3 kids, oldest is almost 12, so we've been dealing with the stomach flu. And like there was a time when I went to my pediatrician, I was like, look, what is up with this? I'm like, we can't, how do we stop this? And he's like, look, like he literally looked at me and was like, if you have poop on your hands, you got poop on your hands. I'm like, dude, what do you mean? He's like, you have to wash your hands to get all the stuff off. Then you have to sanitize your hands. And by the way, bleach is the only thing that kills this particular kind of virus. I was like, wow, that's really that's scary. Like something that I would design as a hacker to like break into places. I'm like, that's kind of scary, right? So we stocked up on the appropriate sanitization tools, right? Rubber gloves, making sure we had bleach to kill the virus, right? Alcohol, sanitizer, the whole thing, which kind of set us up for this particular. We stocked that stuff because of the stomach flu. Yep. And
point of parliamentary procedure, Paul.
Yes,
you're not killing the virus. The virus is technically not alive. I've been doing some research.
Yeah, well, no, Jeff, you're right. You're killing the carrier of it, right? Like washing.
You're dissolving the protective coating that goes around this little bundle of essentially DNA material. It's like a
and it's one thing our family pediatrician kind of reemphasized, right? Like the way that you get rid of this is through this process, right? Yeah. And we were very kind of in tune with that. Dave, you tell me the stories of like your family getting, stomach flus as mine has as well. Right? It's awful. So we kind of prepared for this type of virus, but not anticipating that it would be this respiratory kind of thing that we're dealing with now, right?
Yeah, absolutely crazy. We have face masks and things like that. It's crazy how fast this hit us. But what was interesting when all this started breaking out is that Martin Boss, one of our folks at Trusted Sec that runs our consulting practice.
Martin's awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Martin's amazing. My spirit animal. He is my exact opposite of me, by the way. He's amazing. He's my Kentucky swing.
Yeah, I see that. You're very yin and yang. Yeah,
we're very much yin and yang.
Has he got
people like Dave? I love you, but fuck you. I'm like, oh, I love you, Martin.
All right.
But that's a great relationship we have between the two of us. But Martin, it was interesting. We had a company party right before this whole COVID thing broke out. And him and I got super sick at the company dinner where it was like GI, like really bad stomach aches, feeling sick, temperature, everything. And, you hear the COVID stuff and it's all upper respiratory. And we both went to the hotel and the next 7 days was just an absolute horror show. I lost 14 pounds in 7 days.
I remember seeing you post on that, Dave.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so bad. And so they swabbed me for flu and all these different things and everything came back negative. And you look at this now and you say, well, you look into the studies that are coming out and COVID can hit you in the respiratory issue or can hit you in the GI stuff. And so you're like, man, did I get hit with COVID and I don't even know about it? And I can't even get tested to even look at it.
Yep.
And 2 weeks ago, my son got hit with influenza B and he got swabbed and got tested and everything. And I was like, thank God you have the flu. Like, I'm happy that you have the flu. Like, I know what it is. It's crazy what has really happened so fast for us and how unprepared I think we were. And that's a good testament to security too, like how unprepared we are for a lot of these things that hit us. In many cases, it's a complete parallelism to what we're seeing now to what we have to deal with in security.
It reminds me of the threat modeling we do as organizations, right? When we prepare for some kind of epidemic in the cyber realm, right? And the kind of creativity that goes into what should we prepare for, right? And very much so, healthcare, as we were talking about, Larry, you worked in healthcare. I worked with a lot of healthcare organizations in previous roles too, right? Like if we had said in 2007 or 8 or previous that we had to prepare for this, people would have thought we were crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so much of what we say in security, I think, sounds like crazy talk to people. But now is that paradigm kind of shifted, right? In that it's interesting, the paradigm. Like we can look at what's happening with COVID-19 and go, yeah, those crazy kind of threat models, maybe we should pay attention to. Then you take the Zoom issue and you bring it in and you go, security people that have talked about like we need to fix stuff and we're up on our soapbox going, we need to fix all this stuff and security is bad. And then you look at the Zoom issue and many of us are going, yeah, it's not so bad, right?
Yeah.
And so
it's not really that bad.
Right?
It's really not
maybe
that
you should listen to us, I guess is my point, right? Like,
well,
but not when we do those bad things about releasing 0 days, and that shit makes the national news nowadays, as opposed to when we were doing it 15 years ago.
In Larry,
really quick, Larry, 15 years ago, Larry's calling you a bitch. Just
right?
He totally is. He totally is. I think today Larry's also calling me a bitch. So.
But I propose we change gears and lighten things up a little bit.
Yeah, let's switch gears.
Okay.
So, Jeff, I want you to talk a little bit about the Tribe of Hackers.
Sure.
I think we all have. It's interesting. One thing, and I try and focus on the positive with the whole COVID-19 thing, right? I don't want to ignore the negative, right? So every day we have to consume in our household. It's mandatory. My wife works in healthcare as well. And so like we have to consume the news and figure out what's going on, right? For our families, and especially for folks like my wife and other friends and family that work in healthcare, we have to understand what's going on, right? But we also have to focus on the positive as well. And some of the positive is I've done things like it's really hard for me to consume the security news, as I've always done, without filtering through probably 60+% articles about COVID-19 and related stories, right? That's a really a big struggle for me, and I'm sure many of us. And so I tend to go read books. And Jeff, there are a new series of books. I'm reading a book on Kubernetes. I'm reading All Systems Red, which is about kind of like cyborgs and very much sci-fi, right? To kind of remove me from the situation. Like, let's be honest. We can't all live in the current situation of, well, we're really kind of in the suck. And I'm not saying ignore that, but you have to kind of balance your time. All Systems Red is really awesome. It was recommended to me by someone in our field who I can't remember. Great sci-fi. But there's a lot of books that we can read rather than trying to go read the news and read about all the speculative things and facts and trying to sort through it. I mean, don't ignore that, but that's part of our lives today. So, Jeff, there's a new series of books released by the Tribe of Hackers.
Well, the latest in the series of books, and I happen to have all of them here. The original was Tribe of Hackers. And then last summer, I guess, they put out Tribe of Hackers Red Team Edition. And they've just published the Tribe of Hackers Security Leaders Edition. I happen to have contributed to each of these three books, and we are fortunate to also have Dave online. He is one of the other people that have been in these three editions, so certainly we can get Dave's impression. We interviewed Marcus, probably about a year ago when the first book came out. What I like about these books is that they not only pull together people we've heard of, but people that are, especially even for the Security Leaders edition. We think of leaders as people out in the front and people we know about, icons like Dave. And
Jeff, don't sell yourself short, Jeff.
Absolutely, Jeff.
Well, but people that we've heard of, people that we know about, and I'm relatively new to being heard of and known about. There's people in this book that are, especially from a leadership perspective. Somebody taught me a long time ago that who the leaders are not necessarily the people that have the title of leader or have the title of manager. Leaders in organizations and in groups emerge because they have certain characteristics, and this particular edition of the Tribe of Hackers series in particular, I think, underscores the fact that they've done a great job, Marcus and Marcus, Carey, Jim, pulling together people that are making a difference, whether you've heard of them or not, in our community.
And Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, the proceeds for Tribe of Hackers go to a charity, right? It's not a commercial venture.
I mean, that was true of the original book. I don't know definitively if that's true for the other editions, but certainly the original book, which was self-published, the proceeds went to a couple different charities. Maybe Dave, I don't know, but when they went to an actual publisher, these are published by Wiley Books. Wiley Publishing House. I don't know what their exact title is. Wiley.com. I think they went to a publisher to try to get a larger audience, to try to get larger distribution. I've read a couple reviews already about the latest book, where people are like, pointing out the fact that this is a good resource material, just good general knowledge, good a good book to read because it covers a broad spectrum of topics. And I should say, if you're not familiar with the format, the idea of each of these books is Marcus and Jen came up with a series of questions, and for the people that contributed, they basically sent out a questionnaire and said, answer these questions, and our responses to the questions essentially become the chapter of the book. And so everybody that's in the book is responding to the same questions, so
Jeff, interesting social kind of change with where we're at today, and I'm not sure how to deal with this particular problem, is you encourage your children to read the books they're kind of assigned in school, right? But when before this whole outbreak happened, as many of our listeners know, I would have all of my children in my car, and I would be dropping them off at their various schools. And I would I would involve them in the decision, right, as to which audiobook we would listen to. And it wasn't anything they were assigned in school. And I've given them accounts where they can do that on their own, right? But when they're in the car with Dad, we listen to cybersecurity books, science fiction books that relate to security, the stuff that I was listening to, and they got a lot of good knowledge from that. Where we're at today, not so much. And I encourage people to kind of work with their children to make sure that they're still reading books, listening to books in the capacity, and that's really hard because I'm not dropping them off to school. School is done at home now, if at all, in the remainder of the school calendar year. But encourage them to kind of branch out. And some people will be like, why do kids want to listen to, all these other books? Like, I tell you what, my 3-year-old literally was telling his brothers, the older brothers, like, hey, I'm listening to Dad's book, right? And this was the books that are talking about cybersecurity. And even if he got 25% of that book or 20% or whatever, that was beneficial to him, or her, or whoever your children, right? So I don't know if the Tribe of Hackers is available as an audiobook.
It is. If you go to wiley.com, you can get an audio version of it, and you can also get a hard copy. And of course, they're selling it on Amazon. I don't like to promote Amazon simply because of No Starch Press and the issues that they've had, but it's out there. You can buy it in hard copy or download it. I'm curious.
My advice, Jeff, right? Like, get your children involved into listening to books, whether they're part of their curriculum or not. I think both is really appropriate.
Well, I would say have them read books. You would say have them listen to books.
That's fine too.
It's a generational thing. I'm curious. I don't think I've heard Dave's perspective on the whole Tribe of Hackers series. I'm curious to hear his viewpoint on the whole series and what his experience has been like, being one of the few trifectas in terms of the books.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you look at the Tribe of Hackers as being kind of
Jeff, sorry, Dave, your head is in Jack's mouth.
I'm in his beard. Yeah. Look at
this. Jack, you got a little something in your beard, man.
It's a Dave Kennedy is in your beard.
It's a snack.
No, the whole concept of Tribe of Hackers really came from more of a tribe of business where you take cultures and you create cultures in companies. TrustedSec is a great example of a culture, a tribe of hackers, right? And what Marcus has been able to do that I really appreciate is he's taken different aspects around information security and he's applied them in ways that allow people that are practitioners in those individual areas to really talk about what's made them successful or what has been successful for them. So it started off really much with the tribe of hackers. And then you get more into the tribe of red teams and the leadership pieces around it, and next the blue team piece of it. And what it really does is it's a great read because one, it's short, right? It's not a massive conglomerate book of all of these different things out here. Is that Josh? No, that's Chris Cochran. Sorry, I said Josh Corman. But you look at that and you say, okay, well, what are these people's perspectives that I can learn from? and things that they've gone through that really helps me in a 3 to 4 to 5 page type of message. And I think that's very powerful. There's a book I think I have back here. Yeah, it's right here. There's a book I have here that I really attest to called Rework. And it's from the folks of 37 Signals that made Ruby on Rails. And who introduced me to this book was Chris Nickerson. And he said to me, read this book when you're about to go into business, because it's the exact opposite way that you would think about what you're taught in business. And it was really nice because each chapter is 2 to 3 to 4 pages. And I learned so much about how to create a company based off of this one book alone. The whole concept around, what Marcus has been able to do with the tribe of hackers is really the same type of concept. Learning from your peers or folks that are older, that have gone through a lot of things. What can you learn from them to help your career in the future? And I think it's done a really good job of it.
Hey, Paul, I wonder what Tribe of Hackers edition will be when you and I are in it together.
There are a lot of folks
podcast edition.
Look, there's a lot of folks in information security, and I don't fault anyone for inclusion or non-inclusion. You know what I mean?
Agreed. I'm just saying that there's so many people that Marcus and folks can put in one of these books. There are so many divisions that they could do, that they could be doing this for a long time, and so many people could learn a lot.
But I think it's it's a positive thing for our industry that the more people that are involved in our industry means our industry is growing, right?
Agreed.
And having to select who is in what book. And Dave, after the show, I have a theory that I want to run by you about books I've been listening to that I think maybe involved you, but I'm not sure.
All right.
So make sure you stick around.
Happy to hear it, man. Sure.
Now, I want to talk about some non-Zoom stories. First, if you're looking for alternatives to Zoom, I want to caution people about that, right? Because there's this paradigm in security where can the larger companies do the technology and security better than you can? There is an open source project called Jitsi. Has anyone done or heard about Jitsi?
I have, and I've actually used it.
Is it good? Dave, have you done you have an awesome selection of toilet paper behind you. Dave, have you...
Wait.
Wishful thinking.
Throwback Thursday.
But here's the thing. So I haven't looked at the security, done a security assessment of Jitsi, right?
Nobody's listening to you, Paul.
Can I provide the same level of security as the major providers versus doing it myself? Because I'm responsible for the server, right? And the client's connecting to it, potentially. But more so, I'm responsible for the server side of it. Can I do that better security-wise than the larger providers, is my question.
The answer is I don't know, because there hasn't been a substantial amount of analysis around it itself, security reviews, etc. So the short answer to it is no, but the long answer to it is it's open source and everybody has access to the ability to be able to do that, right? I haven't looked at their security documentation.
Now Dave, my assessment is it works really well. Yours as well? Yeah.
Yeah. It is a great product.
Yeah. I'm impressed. So the reason we're testing is not because of security reasons, but because if we can control it, I can control where the connections go. In other words, remote hosts can connect to us versus connecting to a server out on the internet, where then those connections go back to us, right? So more control. Right.
So you're controlling the whole connection string of everything that you're doing. So everything's going directly to everything that you're connecting to, your server infrastructure, all of your users. It's all centrally located versus a man in the middle type of thing that you're seeing with everything. And by the way, I just want to throw a thing out there really quick. We've been talking about Webex for a number of years, right? Do you know what happens when you enable end-to-end encryption in Webex? Does anybody know?
Yes.
The performance goes
working?
To the shitter.
It stops working. There's no video. It has 7 features that it disables. Video is one of them.
Okay. Security is such an inconvenience.
Well, what's funny is in our case, what we're recording largely for the shows is public anyway, right? So I think that's a great kind of factor in your risk equation is what level of privacy do you need? If I'm talking to Matt Alderman, our CEO, about something that is private information, Am I going to use an open source version? Am I going to use Zoom or Skype or Webex? Or am I going to use Signal, which we know provides a really great level of security in terms of end-to-end encryption, right? In text messages or voice and or video, right?
So really quick on Zoom's privacy policy, they recently, if you look at Zoom's original privacy policy, it was very vague in what they actually did as far as the type of information they collected. Since then, if you go to that same privacy policy, the chief legal officer has expanded on that, basically saying, we do not in any way, shape, or form eavesdrop in your sessions. We don't have the ability to do that from a consumer perspective. And here's the things that we do to consider your privacy secure. So while it's not end-to-end encrypted, we have direct legal interpretations of what that policy means directly from Zoom, stating that your conversations that you have on Zoom are private. Now, there's obviously the big government aspects of that around the NSA, being able to intercept those communications and use it for collections. There's no indications that's happening, but it's absolutely possible. All of that stuff is possible when you're not using end-to-end encryption. I think within the next 6 months, you will see Zoom come out with an end-to-end encryption module that they'll leverage. And I think they're taking this seriously based on the response that we saw from the CEO.
If you want privacy, you have to exchange keys
100%.
Between parties. I mean, that's something we've talked about on the show from the inception, right? You have to exchange keys to have true privacy. Signal gives you a great mechanism to do that. Certainly PGP gives you a great mechanism to do that. When you use these other services, you have to balance the data that's being put into those various streams and make the decision for yourself, which is where I think the crux of the issue is today, right? What we're recording today is going to be released to the public. So if someone's eavesdropping, it's okay, right? And every organization has to make that same decision. Jeff?
Right.
I just want to call party foul, and I'm very disappointed that Dave said the NSA. Dude.
Sorry.
Dave, it's no such agency. Okay?
You know what I'm talking about. And
I do.
Know better.
I do. Oh, I made a boo-boo there. Sorry.
Non-Zoom stories. I did want to cover, because I've been into the whole gaming thing.
One of your non-Zoom stories was a Zoom stories, by the way, in the wiki.
I know. I managed to not filter that one out. But there is a new NVIDIA card that comes with 24 gigs of video RAM. There is a Fat Man, a code name, that has 33.5 teraflops at the clock speed. And basically what they're saying is two things. These new gaming cards from NVIDIA are going to potentially give Microsoft's Xbox a run for their money, but also provide those that are doing AI research a platform that they can do that on, which I thought was interesting for our field.
And the irony that they call it Fat Man.
Fat Man and Little Boy. Fat Man and Little Boy are the code names.
Boom.
So the Fat Man has a whopping 60% more streaming multiprocessors compared to the current GeForce RTX cards, which I think that's why they put them in the game. It was a GeForce RTX 2080 Super, not the TI, because it's almost twice as much. But the Super you can get for around $800. The TI, which is $1,200. Just amazing technology that not only has applications in gaming, but also for password cracking, obviously, and also AI research, right? Which is really cool. Right. And gaming. I mean,
and gaming.
Gaming is really.
Can I get it in my laptop yet, though?
Well, did you guys see the new Razer that came out just today?
No. What is that?
Oh my God. 300 hertz refresh rate on the screen. It's using the i10 processors. It's got the new supers in there. It is incredible for a laptop. I don't need a new laptop, and I'm contemplating pulling the trigger on it.
I mean, I hear the new MSI is going to match that one.
You never need a new laptop. You want a new laptop, Dave.
You're right. You're right.
I didn't really need a new laptop. I wanted a new laptop, right? And that's...
Dude, check us out. Listen to these stats. We're talking more power with an available 8-core 10th Gen Intel Core i7 processor, up to 25% faster graphics with the NVIDIA GeForce RTX Super, and a 300 hertz FHD MATI display for an obscene competitive advantage in high FPS games.
MATI display?
But the whole...
MATI?
The whole thing is like...
It's French. It's mate.
But the whole thing is like Microsoft can build a whole Xbox platform, but what we can build on a PC can far surpass that, right? And the applications are far beyond gaming, which is why I included it in because, like I said, cracking passwords or doing AI and aspects of machine learning become very viable on these platforms, which is just the technology is truly amazing. There was also an OpenWRT vulnerability.
Saw that.
What I found interesting was it seemed like, and I try and tell my children this, right? Like when we work with computers, every little bit matters. And in this case, it seemed like there was a way that they interpreted the space in the front of the SHA-256 hash, where if you created a package that was the same size, you could circumvent the checksum that was put in place by the package manager. Did I get that right?
I think so. Do you see this as a proof of concept for more consumer routers, though? Like, hey, we're testing this little bit of code out, and OpenWRT is obviously the easy place to do that. And like we called earlier, as attackers, we're going to start seeing a lot of IoT, a lot of consumer devices getting hammered on because, hey, that's where all the corporate infrastructure is right now. That's the corporate assets we're trying to implant, lay down some persistence, and then lay low until we get back into corporate environments.
You know what's interesting, Tyler? Like, I've always really sucked at math, right? And I think that many people kind of look at as students, right? Like, oh, their scores in math are low. And I'm like, computers are meant to do math. And I'm like, so if you have to calculate the size of your package that's being installed, I'm like, you don't really need to, like, math is something that computers do. And when I looked at the researcher's code, that was like, oh, by the way, I can produce this package and it's got all my malicious stuff in it. And oh, by the way, I'm going to look at, like, use the computer to compare the legitimate package to my package and go, it's off by X number of bytes. And by the way, just pad that automatically so that my package is the same size. Using the bypass to the checksum, then I can make you install that package. It does require that you're man in the middling that connection in some respect, which is the mitigating factor. The mitigating factor is not my malicious package has to be the same size in bytes as the legitimate package. Because computers do the math for you, right? Like you just need to write the logic. You need to understand the logic, not necessarily the math.
Paul. I used to work with a bunch of mathematicians at a certain 3-letter agency, and they would object vehemently to you saying that the computers do math.
But it's logic versus math, Jeff, right? Like my logic is I need to produce a package that's the same size. The computer computes that math for me. When you look at this person's script, it's really not anything spectacular.
Really quick though, it also should be noticed that DDRT released a patch in January to fix this.
Interesting.
So there already is a patch out and has been out since January to address this. So it goes back to
there's a big surprise
to address this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but DD-Word sucks. No,
your mom.
But thinking about some of the OpenWord stuff, that OpenWord is in so many devices under the hood now, and on IoT devices, and you name it.
You mean like personal VPN,
I meant
wireless pucks?
Sorry.
My point, Jeff, is the code to exploit this vulnerability did not require a vast understanding of mathematical operations, right? It just required the understanding of the logic as to how you deduce the answer.
Well, I would argue that to be able to code it requires that deeper knowledge and understanding. My only pushback, and I'm not a mathematician, but I know a lot of mathematicians. I don't play one on TV. The idea that the computers and technology are doing the math for us instead of us doing the math. I mean, the first computers, what's the name of the movie that came out a couple of years ago?
Imitation Game.
The NASA mathematicians
with the women.
The African American ladies. Whatever that movie is.
Oh, it was a great movie too. What is that movie?
It's a great movie, but those women were literally called computers.
Yes, because it's a great point.
They would do all the mathematical calculations.
If you read the book Cyber Spies, right, they go into the history of computers. Computers were literally people that were doing the computing, right?
Right.
I tend to look at the way that we do it in modern computing as we're telling the computers how to do math, and the computers are doing the math for us.
And I'm simply saying that, and this is the curmudgeon in me, if we throw all that over the computers and we forget how and what they're doing, we've somehow lost.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah,
that's good.
I think it's more important how you get to the answer than the actual answer, right? That's what we're doing as programmers, right? Telling the computer how to deduce the answer rather than.
I mean, I was a person in math class when I was in high school and college that would get the right answer and would get really pissed off because I would get points off on my exam because I didn't show my work. Because I figured it out, damn it. I don't care if I followed the methodology. I wrote out all.
I did that shit in my head.
No,
that good.
Whatever.
The
only other big story out there
in Marriott
really is the Marriott story. We should probably
change your password again.
Again.
Two-factor that bad boy.
And
this is why we should not store those healthcare videos online. Like, let's just keep those, burn them as they go, leave them in a real-time stream. Let the healthcare professionals do their job as best they can, as easy as possible, and not store that. Because either life insurance companies are going to go buy that data 10 years from now and use it against you or your kids, or that's going to get leaked somewhere, somehow, on some S3 bucket or as part of some data breach. So let's just don't store them.
No.
I want to thank everyone who joined today, our regular hosts, and especially Dave for coming in on this segment. And Dave, using various backgrounds in your Zoom room.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's just awesome. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Dave, stick around. I have one question for you after the show off air. Larry, take us out.
Larry, I love you.
Love you. Over and love you, Dave, and out.